In the past couple of days, there's been a flurry of reports that US President Donald Trump and his negotiator-in-chief Steve Witkoff have come up with yet another peace plan for Ukraine. Like previous plans, it apparently hasn't landed well in Ukraine, with Ukrainian officials likening it to a national surrender. Nonetheless, if the reports are to be believed, Russia has apparently finally accepted the idea of post-war security guarantees. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Trump's latest proposal, how it differs from the previous ones, and whether it could actually succeed. The next issue of our magazine, Too Long, is coming out soon, with this issue focusing on realignment in the Middle East, discussing how recent events fundamentally reshape the region. Pre-order your copy or subscribe by clicking the link in the description. So, to understand Trump's latest plan, it's worth starting with a quick recap of his previous attempts at peacemaking. In short, the last time the US and Russia tried to negotiate a peace plan for Ukraine was back in August, after the summit between Trump and Putin in Alaska. But negotiations collapsed within just a couple of weeks, and there were basically three stumbling blocks. First, there was a disagreement over sequencing. The US, as well as Ukraine, wanted a ceasefire before a more comprehensive peace agreement, while Russia said that it would only agree to a ceasefire as part of a fully fleshed out peace agreement. Second, there was a disagreement over territory. Russia demanded that Ukraine give up the remaining territory that it controls in Donbass, but Ukraine refused. For context, while Russia controls basically all of the Luhansk Oblast, Ukraine still controls about 25% of the Donetsk Oblast, including the cities of Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. There were reports that in exchange, Russia was offering to give up the little pockets of land it controls in Ukraine's northern oblasts of Sumy and Kharkiv. But A, these reports were never confirmed, and B, this wouldn't be a very equal trade. Russia was asking Ukraine to give up roughly 7,000 square kilometers in Donbass, while offering something like 450 square kilometers in Sumy and Kharkiv. Thirdly, and finally, there was a disagreement over Ukraine's post-war security guarantees. As we see it, this is both the most important and most difficult issue at play. In short, a security guarantee is the promise by some third country to intervene on Ukraine's behalf in the event of future Russian aggression. Obviously, Ukraine sees security guarantees as necessary for any sustainable peace. After all, without a security guarantee, what's going to stop Russia from invading again once it's rebuilt its forces? But Russia has, suspiciously, refused to countenance even minimal guarantees on the ground that they'll violate the principle of indivisible security. For context, the principle of indivisible security basically means that no one country can strengthen its security at the expense of the security of others. It originated as an idea in the Cold War and basically meant that the US and the Soviet Union couldn't deploy forces in other so-called spheres of influence. Russia argues that while they might improve Ukraine's security, Western security guarantees for Ukraine would undermine Russia's security, and thus violate the principle of indivisible security. No one else really buys this argument, both because they don't really think that security guarantees for Ukraine do undermine Russia's security, as long as Russia doesn't attack Ukraine again, and also because, more generally, most countries don't buy into the principle itself. Since the end of the Cold War, European countries have stopped thinking in the terms of spheres of influence, and post-Soviet states consider themselves independent actors who should be able to make their own decisions on security matters. In short, Ukraine says that it needs security guarantees, but Russia says no. There was a moment after the Alaska summit when Witkoff seemed to think that he got Russia to accept some sort of security guarantee, telling CNN that Russia had agreed to a, quote, Article 5-like security guarantee. This was apparently a misunderstanding. Russia quickly came out and said that it would only accept security guarantees if it had a veto over their implementation, which would render them essentially redundant. While the text of Trump's latest proposal isn't public yet, at least at the time of writing, reports suggest that it essentially concedes to Russia on the first 2 points, in exchange for some Russian concessions on the third point. In other words, it doesn't include a preliminary ceasefire and still requires Ukraine to give up Donbass, but Russia has apparently agreed to let Ukraine have some post-war security guarantees. Russia has apparently made some other minor concessions too. Axios, for instance, is reporting that Russia could give up some land in Kherson and Zaporizhia in exchange, while the Telegraph is reporting that Russia could pay Ukraine some sort of monetary compensation, but has demanded that, as a precondition for any security guarantees, Ukraine must draw down its domestic military. According to reports, Ukraine would be asked to cut its army in half, give up the long-range weapon systems provided by its European allies, and accept the rollback of other US military assistance. Furthermore, while Ukraine wouldn't be asked to recognize Crimea and Donbass as parts of Russia, something that Zelensky has long refused on the grounds that it's not possible under Ukraine's constitution, the US and other European countries would be expected to. Finally, the proposal also stipulates that Russia be accepted as an official state language in Ukraine, and that the Ukrainian branch of the Russian Orthodox Church be granted formal status in the country. Unsurprisingly, this hasn't gone down well in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials told the Financial Times that the proposal amounted to Ukraine giving up its sovereignty, and called the effort a Russian attempt to play the Trump administration, which they added was eager to show progress on a deal. Similarly, Axios reported on Wednesday Zelensky postponed a meeting with Witkoff and the Turkish foreign minister, who's apparently been involved in the negotiations in protest at the deal. It's also worth saying that Zelensky is currently dealing with the fallout of a massive corruption scandal involving several of his close allies, which means that he has less space to make politically difficult concessions. The deal has even apparently upset some of Trump's team. On Wednesday, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, announced his resignation, apparently because he believed fellow US officials were being strung along by Russia. All in all then, the deal hasn't gone down well in Ukraine. Nonetheless, a lot will depend on what these security guarantees actually look like. All we know at the moment is Russia is insisting that no foreign troops be deployed in Ukraine, something that Ukraine's European allies were considering as part of some coalition of the willing. We don't even know if it would just be the US or the US and Europe. Axios, for instance, is talking specifically about US security guarantees, while the Telegraph is reporting that Ukraine would be allowed to ask for security guarantees from both the US and its European allies. So there's a chance that Witkoff has once again misunderstood the Russians, and they might demand a veto over any security guarantees like they did in August. But if Russia has actually accepted the principle of some meaningful post-war security guarantee for Ukraine, this would represent a genuine step towards sustainable peace in Ukraine. When a story like this breaks, though, the headlines aren't just fast, they're fragmented. Depending on where you get your news, you might be seeing a completely different version of the same events. But if we take a look right now using Ground News, we can see that there are 189 sources reporting on it, with most of the coverage coming from the right. If we dive a bit deeper, we can see that the left is framing it as an ominous capitulation, while the right is more optimistic, portraying the plan as revolutionary and a reasonable peace. We're able to get such a detailed analysis thanks to our sponsor, Ground News. If you're overwhelmed by the amount of outlets and stories you're seeing online, Ground News has the solution for you, as they expertly collect and merge thousands of articles into one easy-to-access place, finally giving you an effortless way to consume news and digest media bias. And it doesn't even end there. Ground News offers you comprehensive breakdowns into the ownership, bias distribution, and factuality of each article, allowing you to dive even deeper into every story. For example, if you're worried about how much you can trust what's being said about a certain event, with a click of a button you can filter and sort every story by their factuality level, helping you easily grasp the reliability of each outlet. It's not just the stories we see that shape the narrative though, it's the ones that we don't. Ground News' blind spot feed is the only feature that shows you stories being ignored by one side of the political spectrum, helping you to break out of your bubble and spot what you might have missed. To give you an idea, here we can see this story on Kellogg's resignation, which would have been completely buried if you lean right, as it's mostly being reported by left-leaning outlets. Ground News doesn't just feed you stories based on your algorithm though, it also allows you to see everything the other side might not want you to. Ultimately, that's why we're partnering with them to give you 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.